Dark fantasy D&D doesn't need to look like this. It can look like this. Aesthetically, Arcane has the appearance of a high fantasy steampunk with fantastical inventions and highly stylized animation. But thematically and narratively, it is one of the most beautiful dark fantasy tales that has been told in recent times. And I want to use Arcane to demonstrate why your dark fantasy D&D campaign doesn't need to be all mud and blood. My name is Ben Byrne, and this is the dark fantasy of Arcane.
Who told you it was down you? Come along if you wanted a piece.
The entire premise of the plot of Arcane is that no matter how well intentioned, magic is difficult to wield and it is entirely dangerous. Every time a scene or a situation seems to be going well for our protagonists, having meddled with the arcane is usually the tipping point that turns an encounter into a tragedy. The entire season's inciting incident during the first episode is a robbery gone wrong, when a dropped arcane crystal causes a building to explode. This robbery might have turned out very differently if Jace wasn't experimenting with magic crystals in the first place, and therefore Powder would never have found them. In the third episode, Vander is being rescued by his adoptive children, and they almost escape from the villainous clutches of Silco. But this is until Powder detonates a bomb using one of the arcane crystals she stole from Jace, tragically and unwittingly killing her family, which she was trying to save. Even a seemingly innocuous scene where Victor accidentally scorches Heimerdinger's pet with a Hextech laser beam is another demonstration of how dangerous the arcane is and just how little control any character in the series has over it. Arcane largely follows the advice of one of the first videos that we made for this channel, which is about how to feature magic in a dark fantasy D&D campaign. Arcane shows how magic is dangerous and difficult to wield, and yet at the same time, how spellcasting and arcane fulminations can be beautiful and very obviously magical. Dark fantasy doesn't need to maintain the subtle spellcasting like in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Sometimes showcasing just how spectacular a spell appears can make it seem even more dangerous. And in fact, in Arcane, the neon blue beauty of magic seems to juxtapose its danger. Its brightness and baby blue hue seem to be a beacon of progress to Jace and Victor. As Powder accidentally murders half of her family, she is caught in the rapturous wonder of the blue sparks of magic that her deadly bomb has created. The point is, you don't have to use an entirely low magic setting to play a dark fantasy D&D campaign. You can encourage your players to play up their spellcasting rather than trying to downplay it. I mean, dark fantasy unfolds in the mechanized and magical world of Eberron, which is deeply scarred by the last war, and what hideous dangers lurk beneath the glittering multispectral waves of the ethereal expanse. The morality of Arcane is very complicated, even when the heroes and villains appear clearly defined upon first viewing. Vi, one of our central protagonists, cares deeply about her family and has a strong sense of justice for the downtrodden like she was. Yet Vi also believes that violence is the only way to accomplish her goals and seek justice. In episode 8, she manipulates Jace into attacking a chemical plant by playing upon Jace's frustration of feeling powerless. Yet when the plan results in the accidental killing of a child, Vi justifies that death as collateral damage in her personal vendetta. If we consider one of our main villains, Jinx, well, Jinx just breaks my heart. She is a villainous and chaotic character who torments, traps, and murders folks with a whimsical glee. Yet she seems to inflict pain as a means of exercising her own suffering. Jinx has been told her entire life that she is a curse, and so as a coping mechanism for that trauma, she plays the role she believes has been assigned to her. Ultimately, I don't think Jinx is redeemable even before the season's climax, but she's entirely empathetic and understandable. She was born in tragedy, sparked by the best of intentions. If you're a D&D player, literally any character in Arcane can be used for inspiration for your next flawed dark fantasy hero. You can make an angry idealist, fighter or monk based on Vi or Echo, or a naive, inquisitive rogue based on Caitlyn. Your wizard could be a wise and far-sighted genius like Heimerdinger, whose flaw is being unsympathetic to the immediate plights of your shorter-lived friends. If you're a GM, Arcane also follows the advice that I laid out in this video, where I discussed how to create morally complex villains. I actually talked about Arcane in that video as well, breaking down the main villain Silco's vile actions in pursuit of what he believes to be a righteous cause. Yet even Arcane's minor villains have a motivation or a character trait that makes them sympathetic and therefore complicated people. Marcus is a corrupt enforcer who starts the series ideologically misaligned through ignorance and then becomes trapped by wanting to protect his daughter. Savika isn't that much different from Vi, in all honesty, believing that violence is justifiable. But Savika also proves that she is fiercely loyal and shares Silco's goals and ideals of a free Zorn. If both your party and villains are morally complex characters with both virtues and flaws, you can still create an emotionally engrossing dark fantasy tale against a bright and glittering backdrop. I suppose the other ingredients here are true stakes, something for both your heroes and villains to be fighting for, something that gives hope but can also be a cause of tragedy.
Hold the die, your turn to roll before they fall.
I am personally very particular about the distinction between dark fantasy and grimdark, because the two of them are very frequently conflated, much to my annoyance. Grimdark offers no hope of a positive outcome to the story. It is a genre steeped in nihilism and existential despair. Arcane, on the other hand, is distinctly dark fantasy because it plays in the grey space between hope and tragedy, and balances them both so perfectly for an incredibly engrossing story. The biggest tragedy occurs at the end of episode 3 when Powder kills half of her family with the arcane bomb. This tragedy is felt so keenly because Vander's escape was going so well. The audience was beginning to hope for success, and the tragedy is deepened because it doesn't just cause 3 characters' deaths, but also creates a rift between Powder and Vi, and is the breaking point for Powder's transformation into Jinx. Yet, Arcane also provides hopeful outcomes, like Heimerdinger meeting Echo at the end of the series and being taken to the Firelight Sanctuary. You feel a real sense of optimism that those 2 characters will achieve good things together. And Echo's final line of the series, "Over the laughter of children,"
not enough to give people what they need to survive. You have to give them what they need to live.
Parts of Arcane are heartwarming, like when Vi and Echo are reunited and finally hug. Some parts are beautiful and liberating, like when Vi gets out of prison and goes on a run for the first time in years through the Undercity. There's always hope that the protagonists of Arcane are going to be rewarded and succeed, and very often they do. After the robbery in the first episode goes awry due to the magical crystal exploding the building, Vi, Powder, and their friends escape the enforcers and make it back to the Undercity. In episode 3, Jace and Victor realize their dreams by successfully harnessing the power of the arcane crystals to create hex tech. And in episode 7, Vi and Caitlyn eventually escape the Undercity despite Silco having been hunting them since episode 5. Yet none of these victories come without a cost. The robbery in episode 1 ends with the stolen goods Vi and the gang worked so hard to acquire sinking to the bottom of the harbor. Jace and Victor's hex tech inventions are all eventually turned into weapons, despite the scientists' best intentions. Vi and Caitlin barely escape the Undercity with their lives. Caitlin is injured, Echo sacrifices himself to buy the pair time, and they don't even escape with the arcane orb Caitlin had been sent to recover in the first place. Victory is possible in a dark fantasy story, but it must be hard won. And this can be true of your D&D campaign regardless of the fantasy world that you've set it in. A dark fantasy story could unfold in the mechanized cities of Eberron or upon the starlit sea of the ethereal expanse, wherever there is both hope and tragedy. Alright, finally, because this is a D&D video, allow me to avail you of some quick homebrew I did for a few of the hex tech and mechanized items inspired by the show. Echo's hoverboard is actually pretty easy to homebrew. Just reskin a broom of flying from the Dungeon Master's Guide and slightly tweak the language to say you have to stand atop it rather than stand astride it, and boom. You've got Echo's hoverboard. Vi's gauntlets, on the other hand, require attunement, and they also require a strength score minimum of 13 to be able to wield. While wearing the gauntlets, your character's strength score changes to 23 if it isn't already equal to or above 23, which conventionally it shouldn't be. Your unarmed strikes deal 1d10 magical bludgeoning damage instead of their normal damage, and your armor class goes up by 1 because these things seem pretty big and pretty good at providing defense, and defense is what Vi learns about brawling by the end of the season. That's kind of her character arc as a fighter. Jace's hammer is a heavy, two-handed maul that also has a minimum strength requirement of 13 to be able to wield, because, I mean, look at that dude, he buff. The maul does magical bludgeoning damage and has 10 charges, which can be used to cast the following spells: Guiding Bolt and Thunderwave for 1 charge each, and Branding Smite for 2 charges. All of these spells do force damage instead of their usual damage, and Strength is your spellcasting ability score for casting these spells. Using Strength might seem very unconventional for a spellcasting ability score, but I think that it works because these mechanized hex tech weapons are intended to put the power of the arcane into the hands of an ordinary individual. And remember, any of these fantastical hex tech magic items could be discovered in your dark fantasy D&D campaign if your party is adventuring in a world as beautiful and vibrant as that of Arcane. Dark fantasy is a genre that is defined by the moral complexity of human fallibility, engrossing tales of both hope and tragedy, and speculatively warns about the dangers of power and magic. You can set your dark fantasy game in a low fantasy world of mud and blood like Game of Thrones or Grimhollow, but you can equally set your dark fantasy campaign in a world of beauty and color like that of Arcane and the Ethereal Expanse. If you want to know how to include more of these dark fantasy themes into your campaign, you can find that advice in any of the videos that I've mentioned earlier, or you can join our dark fantasy campaign by subscribing to the channel where we bring out new D&D videos every single week. Such as this video explaining how to create moral dilemmas in your campaign, like the complex politics of Piltover and Zorn. Or this video about how to make mind flayers a formidable and existential threat to your D&D party.